Okay, so this is my second attempt to record this lecture. I left the mute button on for the entire 25-30 minute lecture. So, yeah, I'm gonna try this again, and also please enjoy the Snapchat filters that I've discovered. We will see if this works. I'm gonna pause and replay. Okay, so yeah, so it seems to be working now. I am going to give you an accelerated view of a snap camera, which allows you to throw a filter uh, on top of any footage you make, such as this. Um, my favorite is definitely Mustache Man, but Banana comes in close second as well. And yeah, they're so yeah, I had to have a little fun with this. And it is likely that this is why Snapchat was not doing well. Clearly, I lost the camera footage or the audio, um, and so I'm re-recording now. But I at least wanted to have a little fun with this, and because I got to entertain myself too. It's weird out there. It's weird in here. Um, but yeah. So I'm not gonna record as a potato, but there's some gems in here. So I'm gonna turn off the Snapchat filter after this lecture or after this slide. I don't want to lose anything. So yeah, so the MMPI was originally developed in 1943. We're going to go through a lot more detail of this. You're going to learn all about this test. Um, and and we'll talk a little about the California Personality Inventory. The CPI was developed in the late 50s, around 56, 57, but we're mostly going to focus on the MMPI. It was originally developed to identify personality traits of normally adjusted individuals. Okay, I'm gonna change to anything else, just because it's distracting to me. So I can only imagine how distracting all of this is to you. Okay, we're just gonna do eyebrows or mustache. So okay, so yeah, this was originally developed to identify personality traits of normally adjusted individuals, so typical folks like you and me. And they used criterion groups for some of the subscales. And so essentially comparing reference groups to see if questions could distinguish. That's what a criterion group test is. So men versus women. Again, this is the 1940s and 50s, so they distinguish homosexual men from heterosexual men. Excuse me, I've got something pressing in my mail. Okay, cool. We're good. So yeah, they compared lots of groups and it does produce personality continuums. So it doesn't just like type you like extrovert versus introvert or mustache versus beard. So they did intra versus extroverted, conventional versus unconventional. Um, hmm. Okay, so yeah, where's my mouse? Okay, just didn't want to lose it. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now I am gonna stop briefly recording here to turn off the glorious mustache so that we all can actually focus on the content. But I'm happy to show anyone how to do this. You can link it into Zoom. I just wanted to entertain myself a little. And yes, that is a cereal box. Cool. So we are Snapchat filter free, and we'll just kind of go from here. So the MMPI has gone through some revisions, which I'm very grateful for. I've talked with some folks who were involved in the in the first revision, so the 1989. So I have a little context. However, uh, this this happened over 30 years ago, this revision, and so my sources not 100% like I believe them, but um, it's been a long time. So yeah, so the original was 43. They revised it majorly in 89, and they also created an adolescent form, so the MMPI-A. We're going to focus, we're going to talk about both the MMPI and the MMPI-2. And again, to remind you, the purpose was to distinguish kind of abnormal individuals from normal individuals as defined by the clinicians. So the MMPI-2 requires an 8th grade reading level. The original only required a 6th grade reading level, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Reading skills have actually dropped, apparently, according to this, um, since 43. So the 8th grade reading level in 89 is the equivalent of 6th grade in 43. The average reading difficulty for an individual question is approximately 5th grade. 90% of them require less than a 9th grade education, and the idea here is that you don't want your test to capture things other than your construct you're interested in measuring it. So when you have items that tap education as well, so anything that requires like a 10th or 11th grade reading level or college level, only individuals who have that level can perform at, you know, the ability, like can answer the test without bias, because everyone below that doesn't understand the question, and so their performance is a mixture of their education level and um, whatever the trait is. So essentially, any so you really want your test to, I mean, you don't want it to dumb it down to the point where it's incomprehensible, like it's, you can't ask any complex questions, but you need to recognize that uh, any question that has a higher bar is going to have some challenges. Now, there's also kind of an auditory version and an interview form available, which is really helpful for those that are blind or um, illiterate or are struggling with kind of attention. Um, it's so there are other forms of it, and they're pretty much equivalent. So the original MMPI started as a pool of 1,000 questions. These were drawn from case history, psych reports, textbooks, and existing tests. Um, so, so yeah, and the two main folks here are Stark Hathaway, who's a medical psychologist, and Jovian McKinley, who is a neuropsychiatrist. Both of these folks were at the University of Minnesota hospital system, hence the first M in MMPI. So they were able to narrow down the pool to 504 items that they thought to be relatively independent. So items that weren't, so like you wouldn't have to ask, um, do you prefer cats to dogs versus do you prefer dogs to cats? Those are functionally equivalent, and so you can eliminate one. And so they did that repeatedly just to narrow it down, because having your subjects take 1,000 questions is not, it's not going to work. It's just, it's exhausting. And so even 500 questions is a lot, but it's less than 1,000. Yes, I realize that you did not need a quantitative psychologist to tell you that 1,000 was more than 500. But yeah, apparently that's what this lecture is. Just humor me. So yeah, so those 500 questions were administered to 800 patients in a couple of different groups. And so again, this is a 1943 definition, so I'm trying to kind of map them onto more current things, but these are the groups they called them. So hypochondriacs were patients who were overly concerned with bodily symptoms and expressed conflicts through bodily or somatic symptoms. So you had depressives, who these were patients with depressed mood, loss of appetite, anhedonia, suicidality, so classic kind of depression. This one maps on pretty decently. Hypochondriacs may be somatoform disorder, but they keep changing the definition of somatoform disorder. DSM-5 wonked it, but the idea is still there. Now, psychopathic deviates were patients who were considered antisocial and rebellious and exploitative of others without remorse or anxiety. So a couple of personality disorders fall in here, like the narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. But it's not perfect. Oops, my mouse is on my other computer. Excuse me. Hello? No? There we go. Cool. So we've got 7 groups. But paranoid, so these were patients who showed extreme suspicions and delusions. So think paranoid personality disorder, or kind of just the paranoid side of schizophrenia. Next we have this one I still cannot pronounce, psychoanesthetics. So these were patients who were plagued by excessive self-doubts and obsessive thoughts, anxiety, and low energy. I think there's a personality disorder in here. This one doesn't map on super nicely, as far as I know. But I'm not that kind of psychologist. So there are patients who suffer from this. I'm not disputing that. It's less common. So schizophrenics, again, this is their language. So patients who are disorganized, quote, highly disturbed, out of contact with reality, hallucinating, and having poor relatedness skills. Schizophrenia is probably the more consistent definition across time. At least, I mean, they've cleaned it up, made it a little more systematic in thinking about breaking it down by positive and negative symptoms, but the classic case of schizophrenia still the same expressed today as it was in 1943. The last one is hypomaniacs. So these are patients who are in a high energy, agitated state with poor impulse control, inability to sleep, and poor judgment. So this is like the manic side of bipolar, not the like light level that you see with bipolar 2. This is really just mania. And so in addition, they had 700 controls. Primarily, these were visitors and relatives of patients at the University of Minnesota hospital system. They were administered the same 504 questions. Now, I know I've been leaning on the farm boys anecdote, but there were some serious demographic pieces, and they tried to address this, but there was a lot of country versus city in the original versions. So what they did was they did an item analysis. They looked at which items discriminated between patients in any of those 7 groups from the non-patients. And those were included in one or more of the clinical scales if those questions distinguish. Now, these questions were cross-validated on independent samples. So essentially they administered the reduced list to a new population that still had those specific criteria. So they had the schizophrenics, the hypomaniacs, etc. They had all those same groups and control groups. And they made sure that if a question, so they didn't just lean on chance here. They didn't lean on just, one administration. Oh, this question seems to distinguish, so let's keep it. No, they checked them. They cross-validated them to make sure that if it distinguished once, it would do it again. So they weren't just relying on chance. And so those items that discriminated between the 2 groups meaningfully were retained if they did it over both steps. Okay, so I'm going to render these, and this time the audio is going to be captured. Yay! So yeah, I'll re-render these and upload them and then record the next lecture. Thanks everybody for hanging in there.